Welcome to the October 2024 CIECA webinar, How the Collision Industry is Transitioning to JSON-based APIs. I'm Paul Berry, Executive Director for CIECA. Today's presenters are Paulette Reed, Technical Project Manager for CIECA, Dan Webster, Chair of the CIECA Architecture Committee and Principal Architect IT Enterprise at Enlight, and Phil Martinez, Chair of the CIECA Vehicle Damage Information Committee and Senior Technical Consultant for Mitchell International. And now I'll turn the program over to Paulette.
Today we're going to go over all of our changes that we've been making throughout the year. So welcome again. Also, we have a couple of our architecture team that will be helping me present. And so I have Dan Webster and Phil Martinez on the call as well that will be helping. And we will be taking questions at the end of this call. So I just wanted to start off by congratulating all of our teams for a successful year. We just had one release this year. And to go over some things that's not in our release, we have a lot of standards committees that look at things through the year and create education and help verify that our standards are still accurate. So we did that this year. We had a great Connects presentation with some education sharing, and we have some committees that I wanted to draw light to before we started off with our release. So I'm going to bring up our CIECA webpage here, and we have our CIECA committees, and anything that you have in green are our active committees, and anything that are in blue, they're in maintenance, and at any time we can rejoin these committees and start getting work on those. The ones that I wanted to draw attention to right now was we have the OEM Repair Procedures Build Sheet Data Committee. This committee has done a lot of work this year to look at the industry and the pain points of getting those OEM repair procedures and to look at the data and what is needed. We went through this process, and what we've done is notice that a lot of the stuff that are in questions, there are already solutions out there for. Either CIECA has the data that can be shared, or we have other web pages like OEM One Stop that can provide that data. So they have created a recommendations page that will help show what they have, and it's more of just an education and a help page. Then we have calibration that also did a lot of work. They just went into maintenance mode this month. They went through and looked at all of the calibration workflows that we had in place that CIC has. And with that, we created a UI workflow, and the UI workflow is exactly like that CIC workflow. It just has CIECA reference points into it. So where the CIECA standards and the data would come into play through that process, that's highlighted in that section. The other thing that the calibration team did was looked at the implementation guides, and we've implemented 2 new implementation guides for the calibration and scan. And they've also reviewed the EMS to BMS to CAPIS document that you guys will see in very much detail following this. And then we also had at the top, if you go into the standards and you look at this industry related information, you could see that calibration added this committee prerequisite category chart, and you could check that out. And then the EV committee added an electric vehicle support risk analysis. So this is things that those committees have found that would be great educational pieces, and they have published those here. Good. The one thing that the EV committee did was, again, a lot of analysis into what we needed in the vehicle, what we needed to find, and found out most of those things were already in CIECA, but we did find a new code type of EV and hybrid. So we have 2 new code types, and when we add a code type, we always add checking to make sure that that fits inside of our messages. So a little information, here's our one for our EV, and so you can see that under the tow type, we have our EV type here now. But one of the critical things that we found out is that weight description is always something that's needed now for an EV vehicle. And we have weight description in our BMS already located, and we just wanted to highlight that that is something that's already in the BMS. So if you don't have it in your implementation now, you can grab that. And we also have that in our CAPIS version already out there, but it looks a little bit different. So CAPIS actually has it as vehicle weight. Right here under vehicle is the vehicle weight. So again, a lot of the things are as those committees get together, they look at what the industry is needing, and they find out that we already have that in our standards. We just have to do a refresher and remember where those are. So that is the BMS changes that we made this year. Was just to add that new code type. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dan Webster to do a look at our API processes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Webster. I've been chairing CIECA's Architecture Committee for a little while now. And the main thing we've been focusing on, you can see the maintenance of the BMS standard has slowed down a lot, as the couple changes that Paulette showed you is what we've got for our first release of the year. So the thing that's occupied us for some number of years now has been the next generation of CIECA standard, the one that will use JSON instead of XML. And we've been on that. I think CIECA's first activity in that regard was maybe 2013. And we've been very active on this week after week for 3 years now. And what we started with, as Paulette suggested, was a proof of concept where we showed how you could do a assignment, estimate assignment, a claim save and parts messages using JSON instead of XML. And that was quite a helpful exercise. In doing that, we came up with some architectural decisions, like we had a JSON style guide saying specifically how we were going to render things in the JSON notation. We put all of the definitions of the properties we were going to use and the objects in a standard definitions dictionary schema. And like we had done with a spreadsheet for BMS, we put all the code lists in their own schema as well. So we had a architecture for showing how we would be able to manage a assignment message, parts message, claim save message, and the going on from there in the last 2 years we've convinced ourselves that it's not going to be possible to one at a time take every message and convert it with that messages committee to JSON. And instead, we're trying to help out companies that we know are doing messages that are based on CIECA standards, but using JSON. And we're trying to help them out by saying what the names of the properties should be that follow our style guide and conventions that we're agreeing to, so that even if we can't get messages and schemas out there in time for members to use them, they be less variability conversions that members are doing. So we can get into some of the details on the next slides, but that's the idea, that we have an architecture, and the conversion document is much more complex than just on one side the BMS tag name and on the other the JSON property name, but we'll get into that in much more detail later in this call. So I'm ready for the next slide. So what we've got is committees. We've had committees working for decades now, and the ones doing individual messages haven't had so much to do since we finalized the BMS standard some number of years ago. So the committee that I'm in charge of is architecture. And as it says here, we're setting the foundation for all of the standards. And by standards, we mean the messages and the APIs that CAPIS is all about, the codes for that we're going to use for codeless, the big part of what is standardized in the industry and what CIECA has been all about for decades. And then the key members that contribute to architecture are the ones that participate in the other committees. And we've got 3 of them listed below that we're going to talk about. So architecture sets up a way we're going to do things, how every message and every API is going to be defined in CIECA. And although we took on a couple of messages, the intention wasn't that architecture is going to write all the messages. That's for the individual standards committees, starting with the one headed up by Phil Martinez.
I'll take it from there, Dan. Thank you. My name is Phil Martinez. I'm a technical consultant for Mitchell, and I also chair the VDI committee. What we've done recently is we've completed reviewing, as it states here in the first bullet, the assignment and estimate property names. So we've gone through the entire data dictionary that architecture has been working on and reviewed those and decided what things we are going to carry over into the new API standards, and then what things we are not going to do. So now at this point, we've reviewed all of the property names. Now we're going to start looking at creating some of these new APIs. So if we have people on this call that are interested in joining the committee and working with us, I would suggest that you look on the website and look for the next VDI committee, because we will start rolling up our sleeves and digging in and start creating these new APIs, starting with the vehicle damage assignment. And then once we're done with that, we will look at doing the estimate. But I would encourage anyone on the phone, if you're interested or use these messages, that you come and join our committee. You do not have to be technical. We do look for business people as well. If you have both, great. But I would encourage you guys to go ahead and join the committees. At that point, I will turn it over probably to Paulette, I think, or someone else that's going to cover the AI and referral.
Oh, right. So thank you, Phil and Dan. So the AI committee, they have done a lot of, they began with just industry education, trying to get everybody on the same page. When we got through that, we started working through some workflows, and they were really quick because we had a number of technical folks in that group that they wanted to create the AI message. So we created a message, and then at that time, the EMS to BMS to CAPIS document was created. So they added in their fields to that data and reviewed, mapped, and they actually submitted their draft to the architecture committee. So that's something that the architecture committee will look over, provide feedback to, or we'll have that really quickly in our next implementation in April. The referral committee is also doing a lot of work creating their messages. They have like a draft, and then now they're going through and doing that mapping to the EMS to BMS to CAPIS. So that would be another message that we are working on. It's very similar to the assignment, so it has a lot of crossover to that. So if you're interested in the assignment, I think you would also be interested in the referral committee. So now the big thing that we've worked on as the architecture team is this conversion document. So I kind of wanted to give you some background on the conversion document, and Dan was going to walk you through that, and then we're going to do a deep dive afterwards into that and how that looks and works so everybody can see it.
Excellent. Thanks, Paulette. So after we did the 3 proof of concept messages in the first 2 releases of CAPIS, we tuned into what the membership was saying, that they're ready to do so much more than that. And they are, in fact, doing their own JSON messages based on BMS and EMS. And when were we going to fill out the entirety of the set of tags that CIECA uses for CAPIS and JSON. And we started with the rhetorical question. We've done these first two. How hard could it be to do all the rest? And it didn't take very long where that's not an actual rhetorical question. And in the demonstration that Paulette has for us a little later, you can start seeing some of the complications we came up with. But we started with a spreadsheet, and we imagine it might have 2 or 3 columns, one being the BMS tags, of which there were 1,900 and some. And most of those, or should I say, that covered most of the tags that people have been using in EMS since the 1990s, but not all of them. And then the idea was to follow our new style guide and a few more design principles that architecture had come up with, and put side by side with that what we're going to call the corresponding property in the new CAPIS, JSON, and Open API standards. And that's what we started with. The second column here added BMS data. Paulette did the hard work of finding out not just individual tag names in BMS, but what messages they were in, what aggregates they were in, etc. And that's been very helpful to our process. Adding the CAPIS data was, first of all, for the messages we'd already done, putting them side by side with the BMS tags that they stood in for or took the place of. And then we started thinking about a formalized way of doing this going forward. So things we found out we were doing was abbreviating. Well, first of all, we wanted to make sure the names of the properties we're going to use in our standards are all built up from concatenating real words from the dictionary. And if they're industry standard terms or abbreviations or acronyms, we needed to make sure that we had a list of those acronyms and abbreviations and used them consistently, didn't come up with different acronyms and abbreviations for the same terms, etc. And then we had certain rules for naming. I think one of the ones you might most readily understand is we had tags before that were counts of things that are important in the industry. The number of doors in a car, cylinders in an engine, count of repair lines on an estimate, etc. But we weren't consistent in how we named these, having such patterns as num of, or count, or quantity. So we came up with a rule that said if we determined that a tag name from BMS had been one of these counts, then we were going to name it after what you're counting, followed by QTY for quantity. That's just one example. I won't go through too many rules, but when we found that we were doing a rule that wasn't just for a single tag, but we were going to use it over and over, we started a list of rules, and Paulette will be able to show you some of the rules and how they've been applied. And then we've been going through from 1 to 1983, what we're going to call the new tag, how it's going to fit together. And yeah, here we go, starting with the A's at the top. And I don't know if you want to talk more to this, or I should keep doing it, Paulette, but what she was showing you there, and then quickly pulled it away from us again, was exactly this spreadsheet, the conversion spreadsheet, that's going to yield what we're going to call the CAPIS data dictionary in releases to come very soon.
So I wanted to point out to everybody, since this is a release, that to get to our release, you go to the standards and then you hit click the standards releases. And here it brings up, now we have a link here that says to the EMS to BMS to CAPIS mapping. So if you click that, it will go into this mapping document we're getting ready to show you. It also has our API releases and our BMS releases and our EMS release. So that is how you get to it. You do have to be a member and have to be signed in to see this information, but this is how you see it. Here is our EMS to BMS to CAPIS mapping document. And we were talking about, like Dan said, how we created this. And I've got vehicle pulled up right now. So because I know that everybody in the industry is very familiar with vehicle. That was the first thing that the Architecture Committee found out that we all knew. We tried first notice of loss, and we didn't all know that, and everybody didn't know claims, but everybody knows vehicle. So this is just the data from the vehicle. There's 180 fields. As you can see, there was 1,960 rows total, as Dan said. This is how many we've been working through. And I believe we have like 110 left for the Architecture Committee to review. So to go through this, like Dan said, we had the BMS field name, and then we have the BMS if it's optional, required, repeating. This helps us if we know if it's an array or if it needs to be plural, because that's some of the rules that we have with our naming. This field here is recently added. It's to show that it's an aggregate, because a lot of times aggregates can be flattened because we're moving them up. So this was just an easy way to identify an aggregate. The BMS request, as you can see here, most of them is estimate. This helps us know what BMS messages this is in so that we can do a filter and sort. So when VDI was looking at estimate, we pulled up everything that had estimate in it. When it was doing assignment, when calibration committee was looking for calibration, we just pulled up the calibration and scan. So we can specify that to each industry segment and what they really are experts in. Then the parent BMS aggregate, again, this is just another aggregate field. This is to help us when we do analysis to know that if it's in the specialty vehicle description field, then we might have a special process for that, that we already know that we're flattening that, or we're already, have zero base budgeted, those type of things. So that is what that is for. The BMS path is, again, more just for analysis and to help people know where those are. The qualifier code, that came from the EMS mapping document to the BMS. It doesn't have anything populated here in vehicle. We have the BMS code list, which you could see the name of the code list here. We've got fuel type, state providence, license, see if it's open or closed in this value. And then again, coming from the EMS, any mapping or special things that from the EMS mapping is there. Our EMS field names are in row K, and then our EMS field number is here. Our descriptions and our EMS file, which is important for everybody that does, and you can see they're all in vehicle for this vehicle one. That makes it good. The character in the EMS, so we can do some comparisons on that.
Has it
the EMS format and the EMS code list number. So you can see a lot of, like this one has a code list here, and it also has a code list here. Some of the BMS don't have, we have code lists that we don't show. But then our CAPIS, to kind of give everybody a review of CAPIS by itself. Here's our code names that we've come up with. You could see if they are approved or not by architecture, if U has a yes or no, and if they're blank, we just haven't got to that yet. If we have a no in a parking lot, that means that the Architecture Committee needs to review it a little bit more. But you can also see that this column here, this proposed, that was more while we was doing work on them. If I went through and was reviewing something and I thought the name needed to be changed, I would put something in the proposed list here. And then when we reviewed it, we would move that into the CAPIS if it was approved. And if it was not approved, we would just delete it. Here's who reviewed it. So the architecture is really not in here because if we got a yes, it was approved. But the VDI committee has looked at this. The AI committee, you could see, have looked at these. So there's different, just who's did review. We have like description. We was looking at some rules for description. So that is why that's in there, just to kind of handle that rule. So we could pull them up and filter them. Again, this is the approved. This is if it's in CAPIS and what version of CAPIS it was added. Here's our descriptions that we had in CAPIS. Here's the rules. If you see array should be populated, anytime that we add or change a name, we usually try to have a rule to it. We have corn indicator here that's zero-based budgeted. We have our enum property there if it's supposed to be a code list or an enum. We have some more zero-based budgeted, some flattening,
hazardous
enum rules. So we can look at those a little bit more, and then we just have notes for like when we're doing the review, any questions that we can add over there. As Dan said, we had rules that we have 81 rules now. So this is something that a lot of the acronyms are just words. That's our rule. We have flattening. That's basically, again, going back into the BMS being so complicated. And we had so much nesting that a lot of these areas we flatten out data. The aggregates are flattened. We keep the data, but they're just not nested in different levels below. Then we have zero-based budgeting is just things that we know that we're not going to need. And then, as Dan said, we have a lot of other rules out here that kind of helps all, like this one, Boolean should end with an indicator. So that's just things that we look into. Only automatic numeric properties can have a name that ends with amount. So we have a lot of things that we're just trying to help everybody identify. The abbreviation list is here. That's pretty common abbreviations. We have our acronym list that helps with that. And then we have things that the Architecture Committee has said is not allowed. And that's like UID, and we recommend that you always use UUID. Instead of using GUID, we recommend UUID. So, Dan or Phil, do you guys have anything that you wanted to point out on this?
Well, I just want to mention, I hadn't had a chance to say it before. We've got some new blood on the Architecture Committee, and that has been exceedingly welcome in the work we've been doing in the last year. And it's amazing to me the things we find week to week that have been in our standards for decades. For example, a recent one was that MFG was in there as our standard abbreviation for manufacturer, and it was pointed out that that's actually a abbreviation for manufacturing, and we changed it to MFR, however many places that was, and just the tools we're using now, a shareable Google Docs sheet, and having newer professionals involved in the committee that know more current tools has been very helpful. So I'm hoping with the number of participants on this call that Paul said we might have other potential participants in our architecture committee who are listening.
Yes. Phil, did you have anything?
Yeah, I agree with Dan. Other sets of eyes also is very helpful. Going through these, we go through them day after day after day, and we'll miss certain things like this. So having others involved in committees helps us produce a better product. So again, like I stated earlier, you don't necessarily need to be technical. You could be, more business related, and then challenge us, ask the questions. So that way we provide the industry a better product. So that's really all I have.
So again, just because the architecture team has approved something doesn't mean that we can't change it. And just because we might have said, yeah, this needs to be zero-based budgeted, like we had like the rice indicator and the wheat indicator that was like, oh yeah, that's really not, nobody in that committee recognized it as being anything that was used and today, but if it is and you need it, it's easy to add back in. So it's not that we're setting this. This is just a helpful mapping and what we think is the best practices. But again, the committees and those experts that are using these messages, if you have something that you want to add, change, we just bring that to the committee and have a good discussion to get that done. So in looking at vehicle, I wanted to show you guys, which you guys probably are all familiar with. Here is vehicle in our BMS. So again, if you go out to the releases and you pull up our current BMS, this is what you see. And as we talked about, this is the vehicle info. It's a common aggregate, so it's already nested. So when you pull this up, you've already got one level of nesting into this message. And then you have the VIN info, which had more fields in it, license, which is another level, vehicle description. I wanted to go into vehicle description just because if you look at it, it's got other nestings in here, which is odometer, vehicle options, NICB info and parts, and then that specialty vehicle. So these are all things that when we as a group, we went through and was like, do we need odometer info, just that name odometer info, or can we just add those fields that are under that to vehicle? So that is what we're talking about when we're saying that we're flattening these and removing some of this nesting and this level of complexity. That's what we did. So if we look at vehicle in our CAPIS, you could see that a lot of those things like license plate that were here were not nested down into a vehicle info or a description. VIN is right here. We don't have VIN info. So if you go to our EMS document, you could see that VIN info has been flattened and it's been marked out here, and we have VIN. So we have that information. Again, like vehicle description is one of those aggregates that we took that out. So if you go back to our BMS document, and look at vehicle description, now we just have these all like the make and model, year, description and model, that's all under vehicle itself in CAPIS instead of being up or underneath a different level of so we have model year, make and model. This is all right under vehicle. A lot of the specialty vehicle items were removed or and then like options was brought up. So Dan, do you have anything that you think would be good discussion point to show? I just wanted to show how we kind of moved through the BMS to our document, and now we have it in CAPIS and what it looks like and how we're flattening.
That's really helpful, Paulette. And that idea of flattening, which we mentioned several times, and I was wishing we would get down into a demo of what that is. So we're thinking that the CAPIS representation of industry messages will be that much simpler to understand, faster to process, take less space, etc. And flattening is certainly a vogue thing to do in the world of REST and JSON. But the other thing Paulette mentioned several times, that if you haven't been on a number of these calls, you might not know what we mean by zero-based budgeting. But she's talked about under flattening, making the new CAPIS messages simpler, but even a bigger contribution to that is when you find elements we've been dragging around with us as excess baggage in our CIECA specs for years that aren't needed at all. And that's the zero-based budgeting. We don't just want to have a mapping for everything we've always had, but we want to give a second consideration of whether it's actually needed and have dropped those things out.
So one of those that everybody's probably seen is like document attachment. We did a zero-based budgeting on that because that was just enclosed for our file attachment. So there's no reason to have that because we have that under file. Again, like I mentioned, corn indicator, is something that nobody is using, the wheat indicator. So those were zero-based budgeting. And if we pulled out and did things besides just vehicle, you would see a lot more items that we have found zero-based budgeted. I believe the Massachusetts, there was some kind of code in there just for that nobody uses any longer.
Hazardous.
Again, if we see something that we know is not used, we try to eliminate that, and we're not putting in everything in until it's requested. So when the AI committee came up and had recommendations, again, with new fields, and maybe I could show that if I remove all these filters, you'll see how we do this process. And
hazardous.
Filter on
hazardous.
clear.
Hazardous. Hazardous.
So we see here that the AI committee has the AI model that they wanted to add, an analysis type that they would like to add, an area. So this is all things that are key to those new messages that they're adding. Then we've also got the mapping to things that they've already, the body style we already had in the BMS, company ID, country code. So they're using a lot of this, and they reviewed that. But this is how our committees are going through and saying, yes, this works. And we have dent quantity here, which is a new AI recommended. And you could see that these are all in the parking lot that the architectures looked at, but they want to get down and specialize more. Now that we're finishing that EMS to BMS conversion, but that is what each of those committees do. And we could see that they're going to be adding things that will not be in the BMS possibly.
Hazardous.
So is there any questions, or you can put it in the question and answer. I think this would be a good time if you had any questions over the document itself or the release, that we can get into that.
Hazardous.
Phil and Dan, do you have anything you want else to talk about? I don't see anybody typing in the question and answer section.
Hazardous.
No, I don't really have anything more to add. You saw that we have the responsibilities of the committees, all the hard work volunteers are doing, but understand that we've got permanent professional staff of CIECA that is just extraordinarily helpful in this process, as evidenced by Paulette and the kind of detail she gets into and the things she knows about our existing standard and the upcoming work on the next ones, that it's really appreciated from the volunteers' point of view.
Hazardous.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and I don't have anything else. I'll let.
Hazardous.
Okay, so to go on with our PowerPoint, I just wanted to talk about some. This is what Phil talked about earlier. If you want to learn about our committees, or you want to join a committee, especially any of these that are activated already, just go out here and you could say you want to join a committee. It will send me a message and tell me all the information and all the committees you want to join, and I can get you scheduled into those. If there's a committee that is inactive, and that's something that you're interested in, and you know that there's a new data or a new API that needs to be in that segment, please let us know, and we can kick off those committees and get those started. I know that we are going to be talking about starting up the scheduling and an appointment, and also the parts and procurement are all getting ready to start up again. As I said, the referral and VDI committee are both working on assignment, and then Phil's committee is working, VDI is working on estimate. So we have a lot of different messages going on, and then the OEM repair procedure committee is also working on their APIs. So, but again, anything that's just out there in maintenance mode, if you have a new code list or you have anything, just let us know, and we can get that kicked off and created. So if we don't have any questions, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Paul, do you have anything you want to say to close?
Yeah, well, thank you, Paulette and Dan Webster and Phil Martinez for sharing this today. This presentation has been recorded and will be available later today at CIECA.com. I would also invite you to check CIECA.com for a schedule of future broadcasts and to watch recordings of past webinars. Links are available. So that concludes our meeting today. Thank you all very much for attending and look forward to seeing you at a future CIECA webinar.
Hazardous.